Hello everyone, I'm Michael Vincent. Today bring you a gripping true crime story from New Zealand. A case filled with twists and turns that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. New Zealand, a stunning country in the southwestern Pacific, is made up of the North Island, the South Island, and a handful of smaller islands. Known for its breathtaking landscapes and pristine environment, it's a peaceful place with a population of just 4 million. But back in 2000, a brutal murder shook this small nation to its core. The wife and daughter of Mark Lundy were savagely killed in their own home. For a country like New Zealand, this vicious crime was nothing short of a seismic shock, sparking nationwide outrage and fascination. The investigation took one unexpected turn after another, and even now, more than 2 decades later, unanswered questions linger, fueling endless debates across the country. So, what exactly happened back then? Why does this case still loom so large? Let's rewind to the year 2000 and dive into the details. It was August 29th, 2000, a dreary day with light rain falling over New Zealand, an ordinary day for most. But for the Lundy family of 3, it marked the beginning of a deadly nightmare. The Lundys lived in Palmerston North, a city on the North Island. Mark Lundy, 43, was a kitchenware salesman. He'd been married to Christine Marie Lundy for 18 years, and together they had a 7-year-old daughter, Amber Grace Lundy. By all accounts, they were a happy, tight-knit family until everything changed. That morning, Mark hit the road for a routine business trip to Wellington, about 150 kilometers away. Meanwhile, Christine went about her usual day, picking Amber up from school in the afternoon, grabbing some McDonald's takeout, and heading home with her daughter, both of them in good spirits. The next day, August 30th, a Wednesday, should have been business as usual. Christine would typically wake up early to get Amber ready for school, but by 9:30 a.m., there was no sign of life at the Lundy house. Neighbors started to wonder. James, Christine's brother, tried calling her twice, but no one picked up, something that had never happened before. Growing uneasy, he drove over to check on her. From the outside, the house looked locked up tight, doors and windows shut, like everyone was still asleep. James knocked and called out to his sister. Silence. In a panic, he forced the door open. As he stepped into the living room, a sharp metallic stench hit him. Blood. His heart sank. Moving down the hallway toward the bedrooms, he found his 7-year-old niece, Amber, lying lifeless, covered in blood. She was gone. Frantic, he dialed emergency services and the police. After making the calls, James pressed on to find his sister. When he entered the master bedroom, he froze. The scene was like something out of a horror movie. Christine sprawled face up on the bed, naked, drenched in blood. The walls, floor, and bed were splattered with crimson stains. The room was a chilling sea of red. Overwhelmed, James stumbled outside and waited until over 30 officers arrived. The police combed through the crime scene and confirmed that both Christine and Amber had been hacked to death with a sharp weapon. Multiple blows aimed at their faces and heads, leaving them unrecognizable. Forensic analysis pinned the time of death to before 1 a.m. on August 30th. They also noticed a jewelry box missing from the house, packed with valuables. At first glance, it screamed robbery gone wrong. But here's the kicker. There were no signs of a break-in, and the murder weapon was nowhere to be found. The police tracked down Mark, still in Wellington on his business trip. When he got the news that his wife and daughter had been murdered, he was floored, pale, shaky, barely able to stand. He told them he'd called Christine the night before to say he wouldn't be home. That work was keeping him in Wellington overnight. But now, standing at his doorstep, his family was gone forever. Overnight, Mark went from husband and father to a broken man. Still, the cops weren't buying the grieving widower act. In their experience, murders like this often point to someone close, usually a spouse. They hauled Mark in for questioning. Mark gave them 3 key details. First, on August 29th, he was in Wellington, 150 kilometers from Palmerston North, and checked into a motel in the Petone area around 5 p.m., a fact the motel staff backed up. Second, at about 5:30 p.m., he got a call from Christine, who said she and Amber were heading home and planning to grab McDonald's for dinner. The call ended at 5:43 p.m., confirmed by phone records and a nearby cell tower pinging the motel area. Third, at 8:28 p.m., He called a business partner about a vineyard deal, and that was verified too, with the signal tracing back to the motel. Beyond that, Mark said he stayed put all night, only leaving when the police called. His story didn't give the cops much to work with, so they turned back to the crime scene. On a second sweep, they hit a breakthrough. The family computer had been shut down at 10:52 p.m. on August 29th, with no activity after that. Someone had used it that night, either Christine or the killer. Given the time of death, it could have been right around the murder. The police circled back to Mark, asking where he was at 10:52 p.m. He hesitated, fumbling for an answer, then dropped a bombshell. After his 8:28 p.m. call with his partner, he said he'd arranged for a prostitute to come to his motel around 11:30 p.m. She arrived at 11:45 p.m., stayed for an hour, and left at 12:45 a.m. on August 30th. The cops tracked down the woman and the cab driver who drove her. Both confirmed Mark's story. If the computer shut down at 10:52 p.m. tied to the murder, Mark seemed in the clear. Wellington to Palmerston North is 150 kilometers, one way. Round trip, that's 300 kilometers. With the prostitute leaving at 12:45 a.m. and the murders happening before 1 a.m., there's no way he could have made the drive in time. Plus, at the scene, they only found fingerprints from the Lundy family, no strangers, and no evidence of forced entry. So, how'd the killer get in? Did Christine open the door herself? By September 7th, 2000, the police wrapped up their initial investigation and autopsies. Mark held a funeral for his wife and daughter, overcome with grief, needing support just to stand. At the time, Kiwis across New Zealand felt for him, a guy who'd lost everything in a single night. But the case took a wild turn. In March 2001, Mark Lundy was arrested for murdering Christine and Amber. The cops laid out a motive, a timeline, and hard evidence. Digging deeper, they found Mark was drowning in debt. He'd bought vineyard land in Hawke's Bay, but the deal tanked, leaving him 2 million New Zealand dollars in the red. 4 days before the murders, the Lundys upped their life insurance. Christine's policy jumping from $200,000 to $500,000. Their marriage was on the rocks too, held together only by business ties. The cops figured Mark killed her for the payout. For evidence, they found a paint fleck on Christine's shattered skull that matched paint from Mark's garage. Then, in the trunk of his car, buried in a pile of dirty clothes, they uncovered an old shirt with traces of Christine's brain tissue. Splatter that could only come from an axe attack. As for the timeline, forensics gauged Christine's death at about an hour after eating, based on her stomach contents. The McDonald's receipt showed a purchase at 5:43 p.m. It's a 10-minute walk home, so she might have eaten around 6 p.m. and died by 7 p.m. If so, the 10:52 p.m. computer shutdown was the killer's doing. Why would they stick around using the computer that long? Oddly, it gave Mark an alibi. But the police had a theory. After his 5:30 p.m. call with Christine and his 8:28 p.m. call with his partner, both logged in Wellington, Mark could have sped 150 kilometers back to Palmerston North at 117 kilometers per hour, arriving before 7 p.m. To kill them, clean up, hide the weapon, set the computer to shut down, then raced back to Wellington at 120 kilometers per hour to make his 8:28 p.m. call. With a motive, timeline, and evidence, they locked him up. No bail. Thing is, it was all speculation. The 7 p.m. death relied on Christine eating right after getting home. Unproven. The axe, bloody clothes, and missing jewelry box, never found. Mark swore he was innocent. The timeline felt tight, but that brain tissue on the shirt was damning enough to get him to trial. In April 2002, after 7 hours of deliberation, the jury found Mark guilty of double murder. He got life, with a minimum of 17 years before parole. Both sides griped. Prosecutors wanted 23 years. Defense called it unfair. An appeal bumped it to 20 years, but the story didn't end there. On July 31st, 2002, a new witness stepped up. David Stanley, a club worker in Wellington. He'd seen Mark in his car near the Petone coast around 6 p.m. on August 29th, right when he was supposedly racing home to kill, per the police theory. That threw a wrench in things. People started questioning Mark's guilt. Volunteers even launched a website highlighting holes in the case. First, the car speed, 300 kilometers in under 3 hours, including murder time, assumes perfect conditions, no traffic stops or curves. Peak hour congestion at 5:30 p.m. would have slowed him, and no speeding tickets popped up on the highway. Second, the weapon. No axe or bloody clothes turned up. With all that blood at the scene, why was the only trace on one shirt in his car and nothing in the car or motel? Third, the death time. 7 p.m. came from digestion estimates, but no one knows when Christine ate. Experts later said the window could be off by 6 hours, unraveling the whole timeline. Still, that brain tissue was the linchpin, but the cops couldn't prove it wasn't contaminated, and other evidence didn't hold up. New Zealanders demanded a retrial. In December 2019, the Supreme Court shot down Mark's appeal, saying other evidence unequivocally proved he did it. Yet the debate rages on. It's all guesswork, no concrete proof. If Mark had a partner, pulling it off without a trace is a stretch. He's served 18 years now, still claiming innocence. So, is he the killer? I don't know. If I were on that jury, I'd push for a do-over. For a charge this heavy, evidence has to be airtight. Any reasonable doubt matters. This isn't a puzzle or a detective novel. It's real life. That's the infamous New Zealand murder case. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share, and subscribe. Your support means the world to me. I'm Michael Vincent, and I'll see you in the next video.